Lee Branstetter joins us now from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's a professor of economics and public policy at Carnegie Mellon University. Lee, great to see you again. Welcome to our show on Sunday.
Thank you.
The Japanese government called for this snap election a year ahead of schedule. Some experts say this was a strategic move by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to maintain power and to win a third term in office. Do you look at it that way too?
I agree. The Prime Minister has capitalized very shrewdly on a moment of extreme weakness and disarray on the part of Japan's opposition. Just weeks before this election, Japan's main opposition party imploded, and in its place, there were two new parties contesting for the loyalties of voters that might be opposed to Prime Minister Abe. But these were new parties with relatively new and inexperienced leaders, and at a time when Japan faces real national security threats, and at a time when the economy is doing relatively well, it seems clear that Japanese voters decided to stick with the party and the leader that they know, rather than gamble on these new parties.
Well, exit polls show Prime Minister Abe's coalition maintaining a majority in parliament. Some polls even put that to a supermajority. How will this mean for the party? How will the party form a governing coalition going forward?
The LDP still has its coalition partner, Komeito, that it's been with for a long time. But if the LDP has won a supermajority in its own right, then of course not only can it form a government, but this also provides the Prime Minister with the size of the legislative majority that he would need to push through the revisions to the Japanese Constitution that he has long sought. In addition to this, the Prime Minister has a relatively strong hand in terms of conducting foreign policy and economic policy as he chooses.
Well, let's talk about his ambition, his drive to change Japan's constitution, the pacifist constitution the United States helped written back in the 40s and 50s. What obstacles do you think Prime Minister Abe faced in securing a mandate to make changes to Japan's constitution?
Well, the most important obstacle he's faced has been the deep unease that many Japanese have with the change in this constitution. The Pacific War lies very far back in history, and yet many Japanese still remember this period. They remember the suffering in Japan and around the world at that time. And many Japanese are very, very reluctant to change a constitution that they credit with keeping Japan out of war in the decades since. And by the way, this includes many people who support Prime Minister Abe and his party. He got their vote. But for many of these voters, there's still a deep unease about changing this constitution. And so even though he has the legislative majority that he needs, in order to amend the Constitution, he also needs to win a simple majority in a national referendum. And it's far from clear that he's managed to convince the Japanese voter that this is what Japan really needs. On the other hand, the crisis in North Korea is something that causes many Japanese voters equally strong unease of a different type. Japan feels very exposed to the threat that a nuclear North Korea creates. The North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, has criticized Japan, has threatened Japan, and the thought of a nuclear-armed North Korea makes many Japanese quite nervous. So while there is still a very strong sense on the part of the Japanese voter that the peace constitution is a good thing, this crisis in North Korea makes many Japanese voters question that and consider the need for a stronger military in Japan.
Certainly, we see the paradox and different sentiments over there in Japan. Thanks so much, Lee Branstetter, joining us from Pennsylvania. Thank you.